Thank you for joining me on my soapbox today. My name is Mindy Preffling, and I'm the Client Services Senior Manager for Spencer Ogden, a global energy and infrastructure recruitment agency. As global recruitment experts, we're building an industry that impacts millions. We provide leading recruitment services to our candidates and clients, creating careers to power a sustainable future. The Soapbox Series is a podcast that we've launched to have open discussions with thought leaders in the renewable energy industry to discuss the human element behind our industry and the challenges we face in recruiting, retaining, and promoting top talent, especially as it pertains to diversity, equity, and inclusion. My guest today is Erin Smith, the CEO for Oceansol. Oceansol is a social enterprise that upcycles washed up flip-flops found along the beaches and waterways in Kenya. Oceansol positively impacts over 1,000 Kenyans through the collection of flip-flops and direct employment. They provide steady income to nearly 100 low-income Kenyans and aim to recycle 1 million flip-flops every year. Erin is a US national and earned her bachelor's in Management Information Systems from George Mason University. She has a master's in science in innovation and technology from the University of Virginia and a graduate certificate in organizational development and change management from Georgetown University. She is also currently pursuing a Master's of Science in Social Impact and Strategy from the University of Pennsylvania. Prior to her commitment to social enterprise and saving the ocean, Erin spent nearly 30 years in private equity, corporate, consulting, and large multinationals to grow companies and help them transform their operations. She's currently 100% focused on Oceansol and is working to expand the enterprise to 10 other countries and bring awareness to the looming flip-flop debris problem that is causing havoc in our oceans, and her goal is to create a positive impact on people and our planet. On today's episode, we're going to talk about just how she is going to do that one flip-flop at a time. I hope you enjoy. Erin, thank you so much for joining me on my soapbox today. I'd love for you to open us up with what is Oceansol?
Oh, thank you, Mindy, very much. Pleasure to be here. Oceansol is an interesting entity. We are a social enterprise that basically makes art from flip-flop debris that we find in the Kenyan coastline, the Indian Ocean, and we make art out of that to advocate for marine pollution. So we both operate, kind of my artisans are in Kenya, and that's where the craft is done. That's where we clean the beaches and collect it and make the art. And then we also are nonprofit here in America, where we sell a lot of very large masterpieces and partner with conservation organizations.
Thank you. I'm excited to unpack that with you. How did you get involved with Oceansol?
Well, I knew of the brand for a long time because I lived in Kenya and in Nairobi specifically, and worked across sub-Saharan Africa and Middle East and spent some time there. And a friend of mine was running this project. It kind of started off as a project of cleaning beaches and employing some women in very remote locations of Kenya. And after I kind of quit the corporate world, I was consulting with her and helping her kind of turn it into more of a social enterprise as opposed to like a small scale project. And that's how I got involved. And then, to be honest, there was kind of some issues between shareholders, and one thought it was going to be $1 billion business, and one wanted to kind of stay underwater and save the fishes and be a marine biologist, and the two couldn't meet. So I got involved in it and took over kind of the liabilities and responsibilities of the business.
Okay, so it sounds like your friend was more on like the creative side, but then you came in and brought in more of a corporate purpose.
Yeah, I helped her with that. And, she really wanted to spend more time doing, like you said, conservation work and community outreach. So we ended up restructuring the business. Then Julie decided to go off. She was our founder. She started her own kind of educational trust and is out there kind of doing what I would call sea safaris and ocean safaris, which are amazing. And she's very successful at doing that. And so we've kind of been working not so much side by side, but, supporting each other throughout the growth on both sides.
Okay. So how did you, prior to Kenya, what were you doing? What was your background?
So my background is a bit boring. I was kind of an early pioneer woman in technology, kind of started off in statistical undergraduate and computers, and kind of was programming back when Fortran and BASIC and COBOL were the hit languages. So I ended up being kind of a tech and business consultant for some big consulting organizations. worked in telco, and then I went on to start working with private equity. I worked in London with British Telecom. And then ultimately my last stint as a corporate nerd was in private equity, kind of working across Africa, looking for companies and working in the fintech space. So really heavily, lots of travel, lots of hotel rooms, lots of bonuses, kind of the gerbil wheel, if you will.
Okay. So was this, like when you came on with your friend, was this something that you were looking for, something different than what you had been doing before, or did it just kind of fall in your lap?
Well, I kind of one day honestly took a look in the mirror, and I was turning 50, and a lot of young entrepreneurs weren't listening to 50-year-old ladies on technology consulting anymore. Where my space was a lot in the M&A and transformation of companies, which I loved. But, being on the road, working across Africa and Middle East, it was quite challenging. It was exhausting. And I was kind of ready. I think a lot of people do in their career, especially with the pandemic and, the crash that had happened. You were younger, but like in 2007, and also 9/11, we all have these points in our life where it's time to kind of reevaluate. And I think it was time for me to kind of just get out in nature, live in Kenya, work with the ocean, and kind of have more fun doing kind of business work than kind of just selling more software and converting companies. So that was kind of the catalyst.
Okay, great. And so Oceansol takes flip-flops out of the ocean and then creates works of art from them. Why are there so many flip-flops?
That's a very good question, and often the one we get a lot. So it's quite an interesting, because I kind of asked that too when I started taking over, kind of the operations and business. I was like, oh my God, how much raw material are we going to need? Are there really that many flip-flops? So I started digging it and just kind of did my own research because, there's no like flip-flop, kind of specialist or subject matter expert. But there was a lady in Goldsmith University in London, and she was an anthropologist doctorate, and she did a study more from an anthropology lens, but used the making of a flip-flop to study kind of a very cheap kind of shoe and what the culture is around that. So if you think about, in the story here, I'll give you some background on flip-flops, but we have to always put in the context that a flip-flop, we look at it as kind of Havaianas. We're going to Saint-Tropez, we're going to St. Bart's, we're cruising around like kind of at the breweries and drinking cool ales. It's a fundamental shoe source for about 3.5 billion people in the world. People that live kind of in poverty line, people that live in hot communities, emerging markets, they live in coastal towns. This is about the only shoe they can afford. And it's a luxury to even have two that match. So basically, once you kind of, pulled back the curtain, if you will, and started to look at kind of the poverty level of what, kind of the culture that is around a flip-flop, it made sense because all of a sudden you have this huge volume of flip-flops because those are what people wear. In China, in India, Malaysia, the Caribbean, Mexico, Africa, Guatemala, you just start going kind of below the equator. That is the main shoe. And these shoes get disposed of by the people properly. They kind of are not dirty people and tossing them in the ocean, but there is not the proper waste management kind of functions from a village to the next, kind of like county, if you will, to the city dump, and so forth. And so they just continue to collect in mass, and ultimately, there's a whole process, and I'll explain why they actually get into the ocean. So there is, if you take 3.5 billion people are wearing flip-flops, that's 7 billion, if you think about it, globally a year that are being more than produced.
It's alarming, really. And when when we first started speaking and you explained to me the flip-flop problem, in my mind, I start going into all the other waste that we create as individuals. So if 3.5 billion people are going through at a minimum 1 pair of flip-flops to 2 pair of flip-flops a year, what about all the other waste that those 3.5 billion people are creating? And that's not all the people on a day-to-day basis. And that that's alarming to me.
Yeah, it's very alarming, Mindy. And it's kind of, I think there's a whole analysis or study or kind of a doctorate around kind of below the equator and above the equator. So if you look at the problem, if you look above the equator and below the equator, you have different issues around kind of this whole consumption and fast fashion and recycling that happens. So above the equator, let's talk about straws, right? Everybody's worried about straws. Everybody thinks about, plastic bags. I think you and I were even talking about like the Ziploc bag and how to, have a Tupperware versus a Ziploc bag, and these things, and you have all this fast fashion. But if you go below the equator, straws are not very predominant because, people cannot afford sodas and, it's not a necessary to drink it. So we don't think about it from a hygienic point of view. Fast fashion that you guys all, kind of get rid of and send to, recycling programs or Salvation, those come out to be our first fashion, right? That is like we buy secondhand clothes. And, when I say we, I'm including myself and kind of my entire below the equator communities. And if you take that Ziploc bag, I think, here it's probably costs 50 cents. There, somebody would probably spend, $10 to have a Ziploc bag to preserve food. It gives, what is a Ziploc bag? It, prolongs the life of some food. Well, that's a big problem where we live. It's not a big problem here in America. So I think it's quite interesting that we have this juxtaposition right now going on of issues that are kind of below the equator that are massively produced. You would never think of flip-flops as a big problem, but they are. Even shoes, Crocs, the Adidas slides, all of those types of shoe wear are a massive environmental problem and waste management problem there, but not so much here. So it's kind of, there's a whole thing about educating ourselves in those ways to understand that.
Yeah. Well, I think, something else that I'd like to talk with you about is, and the reason why Spencer Ogden has partnered with Oceansol, our mission is creating careers to power a sustainable future. So we've talked a bit about the sustainability piece, but really I know Oceansol is advocacy through art, which is, I guess, kind of sits parallel to sustainability, if you will. But I'd like to talk about what Oceansol is doing to empower communities in Kenya and creating careers in Kenya, because I know you've done quite a bit of work there, and I think it's really impressive what you've done.
Thank you. I was just going to quickly show you the manatee back here because if you're watching the podcast, you can kind of see the what our art looks like, and there's a bumblebee there. And so as I explained, really so basically, if you go through our kind of life cycle of the business, right? So we have to start where the raw material is, which is our Indian Ocean, because that's where Kenya is. So these flip-flops, these millions of flip-flops come by the tides, and because Kenya and Somalia and Zanzibar and Seychelles are quite in the middle of this massive tidal wave, and they get picked up in China, Malaysia, and India. It kind of just starts to swirl. And how they get to the Indian Ocean first is from a lot of these countries, Haiti's one of them, India's the one, they put dump sites next to the ocean because in their mind years ago, before we had this massive volume of waste, the high tides would come into the dumps and then carry the garbage out, or it could have been disposable, who knows what it was during the time of this creation. But now, obviously, the dumps are full of all of these plastics and non-recyclable components. So the ocean comes in, the high tide comes up and carries it, and then they get into these tides. So the first stop is how we empower people is we empower women in particular to clean the beaches, because the women played a significant role in high impact coastal communities. While their fishermen, husbands, sons, brothers, fathers went fishing, they collected the water, they carry the jugs of the head, collect the water, clean the fish, help prepare it, and then go to market with it. Well, with the fishing issues that we've had with the massive trolling, from Asian communities, the net fishing that's destroying the thing, the fishing has declined. So these women are unemployed and unable to help support their families. So we go after them, that they're our target market for those beach cleanups. And they earn a very fair wage there. So that's kind of one of our things. And that becomes a whole, they can support, they can pay for their school fees, et cetera, with that. So, that's one way. And then we have these artisans that we get, and most of them used to be wood artisans. So they would cut down trees and they would make the art. And so now we target those guys that are trying to cut down a tree and make art and train them to be flip-flop artists. So we have this whole kind of educational training apprenticeship program that we do throughout our whole life cycle, if you will.
That's great.
Yeah.
So about how many people are you employing directly at Oceansol and indirectly through these efforts?
We have direct employees. We have about 40 artisans, but we have about 150 that are, and the reason we call it flex work, right? They get flex because most of these people are farmers. And so they want that flexibility during the high season to go home to, deal with their crops. So they come in and they get paid monthly wages, and but then they go away for like 2 months and then they come back, things like that. But so we have about 150 people that, between myself all the way to kind of washing the flip-flops. That's about our team. And then we've calculated, because we do lots of interviews with our staff and our suppliers, we probably have another 10 it's about 10 people for every person that we are in our ecosystem that we kind of indirectly employ, whether it's the guy that sells us all the cabbage for the meals every day, the lady that produces the uniforms, the truck driver, the guy that helps us, kind of the boxes, throughout our entire supply chain and ecosystem. That's kind of what our statistic has been.
Okay. And I understand, as we talked about a little bit earlier, Oceansol really is a platform for advocacy through art.
Mm-hmm.
It's not necessarily a solution to the flip-flop problem. Do you have any ideas on a solution to the flip-flop problem?
Well, I think, it's biodegradable, right? So going back to what I kind of alluded to a little bit at the beginning, flip-flops are very dirty. It's a very industrial rubber business, right? So if you think about, using the good doctors, and I call her Dr. Flip-Flops, kind of analogy, it starts with the oil in Middle East, right? So we need oil, it needs to get transferred, so it goes by dirty ships, to China, goes into China, gets processed into kind of like, not just crude oil, into an oil that goes to the flip-flop factory. You show up at the flip-flop factory, what's there? Well, it's child labor. You have rooms with 18, 20 people in a room, in bunk beds, basically slaves to the industry. Toxic, no health and safety. So they make the flip-flops, at this level. Then those flip-flops get shipped back, now we're like back on a big container ship back to Ethiopia or Kenya to be sold at the local dukas. And so, and if you think about it, if the dukas are like little shops there in the villages, if you think about that, they're $1.50. So you can imagine the value of this flip-flop, that they even buy it at wholesale, that's 75 cents. And their ability to produce is so high. So, what is it we can do in terms of a solution? It's, I think it's somehow a biodegradable solution, or another option that's affordable for shoe, because a shoe is a very necessary thing for church and work and buses and transportation. They need these shoes. Sure. So it's going to be who's got the balls big enough and the money big enough, to solve that problem. So we kind of feel like we're just this little company that doesn't really, that kind of advocates for it, but we're certainly not, Bill Gates Foundation or anything, at that level that's like, oh my God, here's, billions of dollars to solve it. But it is a big problem and it's becoming bigger and bigger.
Yeah. I think people are becoming much more aware than they used to be about the individual impact that we all have, which is good, but it's really hard to change people's behaviors. Yeah. I'm curious, from where you sit, what do you think people can do to do their part?
Well, I think one thing is this whole kind of, like I said, juxtaposition between above equator and below the equator. Mm-hmm. I think yes, there are things we can do when we're living in Denver and Florida and, DC is like, in terms of recycling, but, that's one person in a way, compared to a wave of people, a household in Kenya is 20 people in a small room, so it's just kind of their production. I mean, I think, understanding kind of these different types of impacts to the environment, especially to the ocean, because that's what we care about. Who would have thought flip-flops were a problem? I think straws have gotten the attention because some Hollywood people have thought about straws and made that a big difference. But, educating yourself on kind of looking at everything we kind of wear and like, I wonder what that would be like in the other side of the world, and the volume of it is where I think, kind of just understanding that magnitude is the beginning. So I think there's a lot around that. I think there are grassroots things you can do. There's loads of people that sponsor us that, do beach cleanups kind of in England or Germany or Belgium, like whether it's lakes or something, they clean up and, they're kind of part of that beach cleanup community. All of us want to get something kind of recycled or properly disposed of before it kind of hits riverways and waterways and makes itself into, kind of the ocean, is ideally, I think everybody would say that is a goal for them. So,
yeah. Yeah. So basically like the awareness piece first, acknowledging that there is a problem, and then educating yourself on what the problem is and what even your individual impact is. And then, probably even just making better decisions, like where you choose to shop, for example, or can you buy this secondhand? I think about that a lot, even with like kitchen utensils, like Pyrex dishes that, I love like the old 70s Pyrex dishes. They make me think of my mom. So I love to find these and at thrift shops rather than going to Bed Bath & Beyond and buying a whole new set if I can help it.
Well, it's the whole, like, I mean, I have to say, because I spend most of my time in Kenya, we come over here to Florida because we run our kind of entity out of here, our charity. And I tell you, going to the store it's first of all, it's exhausting, and unpacking everything. When we go to the store, we go to it's a market. It's a bit like you guys would call a farmer's market. We get we put everything into a bag that's like a basket. I even have one around here. The bananas, everything. Not everything's wrapped. Unpacking anything. Buying things on Amazon. I just, by the time I get a box this big, for a lipstick, and I'm like, oh God, I don't need a lipstick, but I've got bubble wrap, I've got boxes, I've got paper, I've got all this that I'm like, now like, okay, this was a lipstick this big. And there's this consumption here and this whole need for hygiene, or, and I don't know whether the pandemic's made it worse, probably in America. I mean, in Kenya, it's kind of made it like, oh God, we all survived. You know what I mean? It's like, it is bacteria. It is what it is, kind of move on, but I know here it's probably a bit different. But we cannot get over, I swear I take out 2 garbage bins a day here. Then at home, we probably 1 a week.
Yeah. There's quite a bit of waste. It's something that I've personally become really aware of, and I probably need to like calm down a little bit about it, but I feel you. I mean, we order everything online. It's like, well, I mean, you could just go to the store and pick it up all at once versus, because boxes inside boxes. It drives me nutty.
And I think people aren't getting out. I mean, and this is just my personal observations. It's not judgment, but it's the lack of connection with nature. I think in a way, when you're sitting and you're online shopping, you're zooming all day. The America or the first, kind of the first world, but Europe, everybody's kind of getting into this momentum, and they're missing like the blue sky, the outdoors, the animals, the reasons we're all here to live. And it's like, of course, we're extroverted people. Go out and shop and go visit your friends and go have a meal outside that's not coming in a to-go bag that's full of styrofoam and everything else. I do think there's some life choices. It's okay to have bad garbage, like to have bubble wrap, it's not okay to have it every day, but like, it's kind of, I think, making some choices like that.
Yeah, being more conscientious.
Yes.
So I want to talk about the case study of El Pajata. Is that the name of the white rhino?
Pejeta, yes.
El Pejeta. Yeah. Why don't you tell us about El Pejeta? Because I know you had a big involvement.
Well, I'm hoping a lot of your readers will remember about 2 years ago, Sudan, he was the last northern white rhino, died. And I think it went viral. It was a big thing, and people couldn't believe it, and it was very sad. The good news was he'd been at Old Pejeta in Kenya, up near Mount Kenya. And he was in a beautiful conservancy, some amazing rangers, and they were part of a program, and they were taking a lot of his semen because they knew, obviously through death, either poaching, most likely not poaching, but old age, et cetera, he would eventually. So they had a bunch of his semen there that they had protected, and what they needed to do was raise money for inseminating the females to try to bring back the population. So we met with them because we were like, what can we do? And so we do these with some smaller organizations. Leonardo DiCaprio can give them 20 million, but we got to do our part. So we called them up and we made specific replicas of Sudan. The northern whiners, they don't have the pointy black rhino nose. They have more of a snubby nose. So we made that and we sold them. And we kind of raised our prices and sold them for, I think, double or like at least 80% more. And we donated half of our, all that plus whatever we earned to the Old Pejeta. So we partner a lot with these conservation organizations. Like we have a masterpiece of a panda. I have a beautiful gorilla. We have like sharks. We've been picking these endangered species, and then we find conservation partners to work with and raise awareness for their organization. But also, obviously we're selling our art, which allows us to donate. So we've been doing that with Old Pejeta for some time. It's been very successful. I think we're one of the, besides some of the big guys like Leonardo and Gates and others that donate to these causes, largest kind of in group that has helped those programs. So it's quite exciting for us.
We've talked a little bit about how individuals can do a little bit more for their part. How can corporations get involved with Oceansol if they're interested in what you're doing?
Oh, well, I was kind of, I think the brainchild of kind of working with kind of businesses, because I remember at British Telecom, we partnered with a lot of firms like ours to differentiate ourselves. So we've done everything with businesses where, as we've all been in the corporate, go at a conference, it's a huge convention center full of 1 million cubicles and everybody wants your attention and, kind of business card. So we've had like BNP Bank, I think even Bank of America, they've bought some of our statues and giraffes to bring attention, to that. So a lot of people have brought in corporations to bring attention to their, to stand out and be unique in a kind of a crowded space. We made a replica of a Honda 2002 for a dealership in Alabama. He used it as a selfie place for his clients to come in while they were shopping. Kids would play with the car. And, he'd always tell me, I sold so many cars, Erin, from, this Honda, my flip-flop car. And, so it's like, again, that unique differentiation. We've partnered with some people, Chloe, which is a very fancy designer, out of France. We've made a shoe that's made out of our slabs. So we put them together, and then they've put leather around it and, kind of made expensive, shoe price for it, but they sell it for sustainable reasons. And so we've done that. You could buy a masterpiece for your lobby. You can buy a masterpiece for your wife. You can buy a masterpiece for your garden. They've just partnered with us in creating, unique things. We've worked with botanical gardens to make exhibits. We've worked in shopping malls where, it's kind of like to make it interesting, or an exhibition. But, my favorite is boring businesses and services, which is, technology and accounting, kind of bringing like our art, kind of shows a commitment to conservation, but it's whimsical. It's a statement piece. People always remember your lobby. So it's quite a, kind of, for me, it's quite fun to see when people do that, when you get those kind of partnerships and businesses supporting us.
Yeah, they really are, the pieces of art that you produce really are works of art. And I know the forum for today's, for our podcast is, of course, a recording. So you can't really see the art and feel the impact and the beauty without, without going to Oceansol's website. So I encourage everyone to go to the Oceansol website so you can see what Erin and her team are doing. If you're watching, you can see the manatee in the background that Erin showed us. But There's also some really good resources on the website that explain in more detail what Oceansol is doing. And so I highly recommend you take some time. There's a 60-second video that's hosted really by one of the artisans for Oceansol, and you can see the impact that Oceansol has on the beaches, on our oceans, and on the community in Kenya. So I really encourage that, because that's the purpose of this episode, really is to bring some more awareness to what Oceansol is doing, and hopefully get some more interest around the art. But I definitely encourage everyone to take a look at the website, because the art's really beautiful.
Thank you, Mindy. It is. And there's lots of, we had a viral video. It's funny, I go places around the world. I was stuck in Croatia. Our flight got delayed by like 24 hours. And
horrible place to be stuck.
Yeah, I know, it was terrible. But I was in the airport with Delta, so I was quite not so happy then. But it's like, and there was only one plane in Croatia for Delta, which makes sense. But so we were there, and I pulled out one of the animals. I don't know, we were doing something. I was looking at it, and this lady's like, "Oh my God, I know that company." I mean, people do know from this viral video we had a few years ago, and Francis telling the story. I think we do have great brand recognition. I think, it's always a struggle when you're in a whimsical brand that's kind of making a statement. It's not to everybody's taste. We have lots of colors. It's like very, kind of, it's very detailed and very artistic, at that level. But, sometimes it's not everybody's taste, but they want to support us. So we do, we ask people if they, kind of can't stand the colors. A lot of my friends from New York, they're like, "Oh my God, I only wear black and white, Erin." I would never have this in my house. But like, we host beach cleanups. People can, they pay for a beach cleanup for like a month. We do things like that. So there's lots of ways to help and, get these flip-flops and other trash. We pick up all the trash. We just keep the flip-flops. And then the kind of people that are working to clean up the beaches, they go and either sell the rest of that waste, or they figure out ways to recycle it. So it's not just us that benefits from these beach cleanups.
Yeah. Well, and you also offer a lot of different types of, you have different animals. So I think there's a lot of different appeal to this artwork. Spencer Ogden is participating in a couple of different ways with Oceansol, but one of which is for corporate gifts, which I think, we spend, there's a lot of waste on corporate gifts, like creating hoodies or water bottles or things that actually do end up in the trash bin. Yeah, forget. Gosh, those were so big for some time.
We were like big for, and used to fight over them. We always called them sneaker nets. What I mean? It was just like you go from one PC to the other. I'm dating myself already.
Yeah, if you get something from Oceansol, there's a lot more meaning behind it, and it's more sustainable than producing something that somebody really doesn't care about. Even if it's not their taste, you can appreciate what it is that you're doing.
What it stands for, yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, anything else you want to talk about today?
No, I'm fine. I think we covered a lot. Do you?
I think we covered everything.
Oh, Mindy, thank you.
No, thank you, Erin. I really appreciate you taking the time to be a guest on my soapbox today. I'm a big advocate for Oceansol, and will continue to be so. So thank you so much for the time, and looking forward to continuing our partnership with Oceansol.
Well, thank you so much, Mindy, and for Spencer Ogden and everybody for listening. And hopefully you learned something about what the flip-flop and why there's so many out there. So we look forward to it.
Thank you.
Thank you.